Hello and welcome to another episode of Topline Talks, hosted by me, Owen Myers.
And me, Ryan Cook.
Very good to have Ryan with me. Jenna is still off, getting used to life with baby number 2. So for those that are new to the podcast, this is our second series. It's all around bringing inspiring stories and insights from inspirational guests across the market. We're a senior finance and executive recruiter. And today we've got a fascinating guest with us. We're joined by Stefanie Brown Hawkins.
Well done.
Who, as well as professional networker, nerd, and everything under the sun, is CFO at INOTEC AMD, which is a Cambridge, London-based life sciences business.
MedTech,
going through some interesting stuff. So she's joining us today to talk all things about her career, CFO, NED insights. We talk a little bit about the life sciences industry, talk about getting a first job in as a NED, and a few other bits and pieces in between. So
thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. Straight from a board meeting, I understand as well.
And another board meeting on Friday. So no rest for the wicked. And I've literally just got off a plane from America. So
amazing.
Yeah,
we'll keep it light.
Yeah.
This isn't the FT.
It's midday for me, so I'm set. Yeah, we're
3 hours it is then.
Yeah,
go on then.
I'm good to go.
I'm over in LA next week actually.
It's a brutal flight.
I can't wait. It's
brutal flight.
Horrible.
Albeit the 12 hours is nice. I used to work the 12 hours, so you get on the flight. It's about maybe you have 10 hours, and I used to sit down, have a meal, and work most of the flight. And then I realized kind of as I've gotten older, it's like the one time where nobody can bother you.
Yeah.
So I've made it a point now. I will work in the lounge. I will take calls in the lounge. I will take calls when I land. But that golden 10 hours, because I usually do long hauls, is great. It's just So I land refreshed, or I land kind of having decompressed a little bit, because it's nonstop. It doesn't, you know, like you say, I wear about 8 hats, let alone personal and professional. So Gotta find some hours when you can.
Yeah, absolutely. So to kick off for listeners, can you give us sort of a umbrella overview?
The whistle stop tour?
Yeah, that would be fantastic.
So when people ask me this question, what do you do or what do you consider yourself? I usually say life science strategist, because I don't really traditionally fit in a singular bucket. And I kind of don't like that either, because I feel like nowadays people are so much more than just a finance professional, right? You can be an accountant, you can be a strategic, you can be all these other things that kind of wrap up into one. So I definitely am a strategist. I started out as a scientist for nearly a decade, pivoted into commercial consulting, been in finance for probably the last 10 years. And then this last role, so I was always biologics and pharma, and then I pivoted a little bit into medtech. It's really interesting. So I like to add more skill sets, bows in the pack, or whatever analogy you want to bring up, but I don't like being pigeonholed to one. I'd like to learn about a lot, so curious by nature. And so this has been interesting. Last year I was probably spent CFO of a medtech, on the NED role as a medtech, advisory board of another medtech, but different subsectors. So the CFO is in wound care, the NED role is in orthotics, and the advisory is wellness. So kind of pursuing the landscape. And then I'm also advisory board of another CFO network, which is just a fantastic community. There's probably close to 250, 300 CFOs,
wow.
Cross-sector, sector agnostic. And what's great is as a finance head, you're just trying to solve the same problem. Yeah. I've solved the same problem in every company I've been in, or I've done ERP in every company I've been in, or, transformation. It's all the same. But, I've learned what worked, what didn't work. So at least if I can pass some of that on. I was talking to a guy at JLR, and he's like, we're trying to do, I was like, just don't talk, just don't do that. Just go over here. It's like, oh, thanks. I was like, I just saved you about 4 months of headaches. So that's really, it's like that kind of community. So we have a lot of roundtables, and I've hosted a few kind of luncheons on different topics. So when I have the time. So
when you have the time.
Well, just out of interest, though, because your journey's, it's so unorthodox.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fascinating. And you
it's
started
very
off as an
left field.
Yeah, but I was going to say, but how much of that was organic, and how much of that was actually, okay, and sort of assessing the landscape and going, this would be a logical next step?
So I think there's probably different pivot points throughout the journey where I kind of said, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, okay.
So I was pre-med, I did molecular biology and genomics, and I was coming out and I was going to go to med school, and then this really interesting research role had come up, and I said, right, I'll go and try that. And it was oncology therapeutics. And I remember a couple of years in, I was talking to the head of one of the BD heads, and we were talking about this really niche opportunity, but man, was it innovative and different. It would have been first to market, best in class, but it's a niche subset of the population, right? So for a big biotech, I was at Amgen at the time, I can understand profitability-wise, the money that they would spend in R&D. It wasn't really as lucrative, but the guy walks in and he says, this is going to be this, multi-billion opportunity. I'm like, whoa, slow down. It's not, it's niche. And he's like, no. And then sure enough, a year down the road,
Sure.
right, program is kind of put on hold to try and assess, versus the other molecules in the pipeline and projects, how it fares and where they want to spend their money. And then the exact opposite comes off. So, you're working on another asset, and they said, oh, super niche. And I'm like, the patient subset is huge. Like, and no. So you sit there, I'm like, I can do this better.
Yeah, sure.
So ended up pivoting and doing graduate work. So I did MBA, I did quant work, I did a whole bunch of things where I thought, okay, how do I, at least from an academic perspective, how do I build that skill set where people think I'm credible? But then the market, I didn't think, was ready for people to transition. And the only jobs I'd kind of heard of was the scientists that go from bench to like head of IR.
Yeah.
And at that time, okay, you knew the science, so you could be IR. And I was like, I don't really want to do IR. I'm really good at explaining the science. And then I was in America and transitioned to the UK. My husband's British and just ended up leaving the land of sunshine. I mean, people ask me this all the time, like, why did you leave Los Angeles to come to a gray island? I really like it here. So, I mean, it's a culture and it's fantastic. So I came over here and everybody was similar saying, explain to me your background. So why do you want to transition out? Have the story. Well, you haven't done this before, but I know I can. Well, come back to us when you've done it before. And so AstraZeneca took a chance on me. I headed up their emerging portfolio. So I was head of every asset pre-launch from a finance perspective on the commercial side. And it was fascinating. And so once that ball rolled, then it was a commercial role, then it was consulting. And then I think probably the best part was then I thought, okay, I've got this experience, then where do I want to go next? And it's funny because everybody asks you, oh, what do you aspire to be? And they say, oh, and you have to say CFO, right? Because if you don't, people think something's wrong with you. But you look at it and I said, if I want to be CFO, I should have gone to an investment bank, or I should have gone to private equity, or I should have gone to McKinsey, right? Because those are I've worked for a McKinsey partner, I've worked for Goldman Sachs, I've worked for Lazard. I've never worked for someone organically grown in the organization and has gone up to CFO. So I said, I just want to build a good breadth. And at the time, Simon Dingemans was CFO of GSK, and he had this program for talent development that took graduate degree holders and took about a 10-year career and smushed it into about 4 years. So I worked for him for the first year, and then they sent me to Italy to grow the businesses there. And then he said, I kind of became like the fixer. He said, oh, can you fix this? Oh, can you fix that? And so he said, can you just fix finance? And I said, well, can you be a little bit more
That's a big statement.
specific? He wasn't a man of many words, and ended up doing a big finance transformation. So kind of thinking through that was the one role where I thought, ooh, I'm on this career path, commercially driven. What's transformation really going to offer me? It feels like a left turn.
Yeah.
It was the best role by far I've ever done. The best team, best learning. I can tell you how to restructure in probably about 23, 25 countries, employment law, and it was really helpful. So now coming into PE space and they're thinking, okay, where do I incorporate, or where do I structure, or how do I do my subs, or, how should I look at single payer systems versus the US landscape? I mean, I've kind of done it all, so to speak. Yeah. So that's what I was trying to build. But it wasn't until the end of my tenure at GSK, they offered me a senior role in corp dev. So I came full circle, but about 10 years later, where I'm like, I know I can explain it and I can explain it better. But I was grateful because I'd built this breadth of experience behind commercial, different regions, different companies to come back and say, all right, I actually understand the science. I know commercially what I'm talking about. And let's go look at some early stage.
And I guess the ability to manage stakeholders.
It's so different.
Yeah, I bet.
It's funny. Some companies, it's personalities. Some companies, it's a really toxic culture. Some companies, it's slow because it's like GSK was big, wonderful culture. I really, honestly, the best work experience, but it's an oil tanker and it's driven by consensus. So you're like, great, I got this great idea. 6 months down the line, you get everybody rubber stamp, it's good. And then you're like, well, it's obsolete now. So guess we're going to start again. And so that's the hard part with the big strategics versus now I said to the team, it's funny, I said to the team, it's like a month ago, I said, right, can we just outsource this? I said, yeah, sure. So we had 2 people, 2 quotes, 1 looked good, done. And it was implemented in about 2 weeks as well.
Wow,
so you're just sitting there going, wait, sorry, there's no committee, there's no, like, I don't have to go to the board, like what?
We can definitely relate to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's it's a nicety where I'm like, okay, I know that works well, that doesn't, but the market's moved, right? So is my knowledge still relevant? Yes and no. So let's go see what the market's like. There's so much tech now and so much innovation and so much, how do you kind of streamline this or analytics or AI or all these different tools? What tool is right at what stage? So that's been kind of, is this still relevant? And, it might have been relevant for something, 100,000 like GSK, but it's not relevant for a 50, 100, 250 person company.
Aside from obviously the breadth of technical experience you would have got through the path you just, but now that you're in a sort of startup, scale up type of world, what is it about having the heritage from the likes of GSK and Gilead and Amgen, et cetera, that you think is allowing you to thrive in the small company world?
I was watching this, it's going to elude me. It was not a podcast, but it was a series on Silicon Valley kind of venture funds. And one of the founders had said that he works like as a mentor for some of the college graduates. And a lot, because Silicon Valley, there's a lot of entrepreneurs. They come to him and say, what should I do? I've got this offer from Google. I've got this offer from Meta. But I also have this fantastic idea for this, company. I know I can do it. And he goes, go to Google, go to Meta. Idea can wait. And that's really controversial, right? Because some people would say, if you've really got that passion and you're driven and you know what you want to do, like go do it. But I just speaking from my own path, something about foundationally growing up where you can not only see what good looks like, how to drive decisions in a very complex matrix, huge organization, how to drive decisions or influence where it's toxic, where it's good, and then culturally. So I've moved to different countries and worked in different languages, and I have the utmost respect for people with English as a second language because you're trying to articulate something and influence and not your native brain, so to speak, and it's not easy. At least, I'm trying to, I'm sitting there going, how do I explain to you commercially what I'm trying to, and you have a lot of pauses and it's not kind of your natural self. So wrapping all of that together, that was a thing that could be offered through the big strategics, right? They'll move you around the world or they'll send you an assignment. So it really is like, people have to do their own path, but growing up in a big strategic or many big strategics, it's, I could go and say, right, that's not how AZ did it. I don't think it's fit for purpose here, but I can take 30% of that and save and, just streamline through because I know that that's good. And then, okay, what culturally makes sense in the new place? And so when I joined Gilead, there was no global commercial finance structure, organization, process. So it had to completely be redesigned. I had to build out the team. And there were a lot of lessons learned from the past companies where I could just pull that through. And then now in the smaller world, it's almost like it's super, not second nature, but it's very easy. So I'm like, okay,
Well, just the nimbleness in
Yeah.
itself, as you
Oh,
say,
so-
you know, we should do this.
I don't know if I'll
and-
ever go back. Like
Yeah, sure.
people
No,
ask me that, like,
yeah,
would you go back to large cap? And if there was a specific purpose for it, maybe,
Yeah.
you know, like looking at a particular slice of the business or something like that. But there's something where you can just drive things through. And medtech is so interesting because I'm used to biologics, 10 years. There's a lot of R&D cost development. How do you commercialize? What are the different data points telling you about how you can go to market? MedTech's like you have something that works or doesn't.
Yeah.
And we're working on Gen 2 at the minute. It's 6 months away from filing, and then it's 6 months to decision because it's a legacy build. So it's probably less than for FDA approval. And you sit there and you go, so I was running the timelines with the chief operating officer. He goes, yeah, you know, if we file Q4, it's 180 days. We'll probably hear back maybe like 90 to 120. I was just sitting there going, so we launched at 26? He's, yeah. And, you know, we need 6 month lead time for materials to ramp up. And I was just sitting there going,
yeah, this is mad.
what?
Yeah.
Okay, like this is great. Done.
Yeah.
So now it's more about, okay, how do we get bodies in and scale up? And we really need to expand in the US. We're doing that at the minute. So hiring Salesforce and things like that. So it's like, you just, hi,
Absolutely,
HR,
yeah.
need to
We need to
hire
crack on. Yeah,
like,
sure.
can you fill the pipe?
Yesterday.
Yep, she's on it. And it's great, right? And you know everybody, bad behaviors are, you know, snuffed out very quickly. You can't afford it. So if somebody's not rolling up their sleeves, it's okay, maybe this isn't the right environment for you. So it is, you know,
Yeah.
if you're not willing to there's a lot at risk, right? So you're safe in a big strategic. There's a lot more at risk I mean, we could fail tomorrow and go out of business, right? There's no safety net. Where I remember a lung program failed at Gilead for sacituzumab, which is their main TROP2 ADC. And I wrote $7 billion off the balance sheet one quarter.
Wow.
The market didn't care because the quarterly results were good. We had a good commercial story. Chief commercial officer is great. She explained it very succinctly, and share price was the same. So, I mean, it fluctuated slightly, but I mean, just you think $7 billion.
Yeah,
that's
insane.
massive,
Yeah,
right?
Of course it is. Yeah,
like
100%. Yeah. That's a sleepless night.
You
without a shadow
know
of
what I mean? Like, and I'm just sitting there going, okay. And then like,
oh, Mr. Zero.
I know.
Okay.
And then you're like, can we put out this announcement at 5 p.m. on Friday, please? And they're, you know, it's just like, it's the other bit I'd probably say is in a large strategic, you get really good at one part of finance. And then you move to another role and you get really good at that other one part of finance. So for most of my career, I owned the P&L, right? But in a big strategic, costs are allocated.
Yep.
I don't control central. I don't control HR. Like, so they tell me to control margins, and I'm like, listen,
cost centers are all over.
essentially, I've got revenue and OpEx. Like, there's nothing else you're going to allow me to do. I don't get balance sheet. I don't get cash flow. You know, there's certain things you can work on, like pricing or payment terms, things like that. But you don't get, now I have it all.
Yeah.
So I have reviews on balance sheet. I have reviews on cash flow. I do weekly cash flow meetings. We do forecasts left, right, and center because we're trying to manage different priorities. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. I was like, I have decision authority. Like, great. But you don't get that in a large strategic, right? So
some of the cultural stuff you were mentioning when you said about transformation and, you know, toxic teams, great teams, you know, multi-jurisdictional teams. How do you find that? Because I think you're probably someone automatically people go to because you understand the academic mindset, you understand the commercial mindset, you've seen a huge amount. So I guess, do you also find yourself often the person that people look to say,
what's this?
Yeah, especially when you work into a startup scale-up environment where, you know, often we'll see it where we'll be sat in front of a founder CEO or a split board.
Yeah.
And actually you've got this sort of academic group that are firing from one side, and then you've got, and it's almost, how do we bring, and I would see, and genuinely, if you were around the table, I'd say, well, you know, I think this is someone actually that could
I'm very good. I'm
bring this
very
together.
good at a commercial story. I have to say, I there's a lot of things I can work on. I'm very good at a commercial story and like what it means. So yes, so I was on an investor call, was it a couple weeks ago? And you go around the table and it's investor, finance analyst, the chairman who's a legacy of, commercial build, IPO, but very entrepreneurial. He was in VC world. And you go around the table and they're trying to explain something scientifically, and all of them, well, I'm not a scientist. And they go around to the next one, well, kind of, and I'm just sitting there kind of laughing and smiling. And then they look at me, I'm like, you do realize that your CFO is the only scientifically qualified person in this table, right? And then they start laughing and you go, right. So let me kind of just break it down. It's more this path than that path, and this is how we've outlined it. So I do feel like I have to know more of the detail to kind of drive through, but that leveling of, are we at 30,000 feet? Are we at 15,000 feet? And then how do you kind of dip in and out? Because nobody wants to be explained to
sure. Yeah, I get that.
In like a lot of detail. But also, I had plenty of people throughout my career that said, "Can I just have 10 minutes?" I'm new. I've not been a legacy career in finance, but this is how it's all playing out. Do you see it that way? And the chief accounting officer at GSK was my sponsor, and he said, "Oh, Stefanie, like we've done this, this, and this in the past. We've not done this. Try this." And you're like, "Okay." And so everybody was really generous with the 10 to 15 minutes. So I think that's also really important because that also builds on the why come to me or why. Also, I'm extroverted. I'd probably say a little bit more ambivert as I get older because I'm just like, give me a minute to recap or, regroup. But I'm happy to go and meet people. I'm happy to go to chat to people. Happy to give. I've got, a wonderful group of women actually that just turned out to be all women that I mentor at the minute, and from different various companies I've been at. And so it's, I like doing stuff like that. Whereas some people, it depends on your personality type, right? So some people are get in, get out. And so, like here's what it is. So you got to kind of read the room, adjust to that a little bit.
I was going to say, just to take that thread, for anyone listening, how do you get your first Ned job? What's the reality of it?
The first one's the hardest, right? So I really honestly wasn't looking so much for it. I'd had conversations, and how it evolved for me specifically. And I've got kind of like two theories about this. So how it evolved for me was I was looking for CFO roles. I was doing a lot of interviews, meeting a lot of CEOs and meeting a lot of chairmans. And I had met the chairman and the CEO at INOTEC. I really liked them. I liked the fact that they were strategic and collaborative, and that was really important. A couple of the other ones were, you stay in your swim lane, I'm going to stay here. You do your finance accounting, I'm going to do. And you're like, hey, listen, we're partners. So you kind of have to tease that out. And as I was going through these conversations, so I'd accepted INOTEC, and one of the chairmans had come back and said, would you CFO for us as well, which was Amparo. And I said, oh, I've accepted. I'm 2 months in. I couldn't even like help you, even just to help. Like I'm trying to get stuck in. We were writing the 5-year business plan. It was a board was coming up. It was quite a busy time, and I remember going back to the headhunter saying, "But I really like this chairman. If that's not on the table, is anything else?" And so they had a conversation, and he said, "We could really use you on the board. I want your time in any capacity I can get it." And so we talked about Ned, and they had not had an independent Ned before. So it's kind of everybody learning as we're going. But he was wonderful. And he's, again, collaborative, open to discussion. He listens to, I can tell him, hey, this isn't, I don't, you can do what you want. I don't agree with that. And he's like, right, okay, I see your point. Or it's nice to have that back and forth. So it's interesting that for people wanting to get on the Ned ladder, a lot of it was network conversation. I've been to every Shrek's, the mid-tier boutique, you name it. Because moving back from the States after COVID, I kind of let my network lapse here a little bit. So that had kind of helped. So you never know where those conversations are going to roll. So if you want a Ned, there's probably 2 paths. I've seen people do through trusts, through charities that serve a path to the end goal, right? So they're charities in life sciences, in a hemophilia society or whatever society, and then they pivot out of that to a proper NED role because you've done a trustee or you've done a charity. So that's one path. I've known a couple very, very senior people that have done that, or people through their network, through word of mouth, get the first. And then I have to say, because I've gotten the first, then the floodgates open. So I get emails pretty much every week. So what do you think about this? Or would you be interested in that? Or the market's ticked up, right? So it depends. And you guys probably see this, right? And like when you're really busy, the NED roles are really busy, right? And it trickles down probably.
Yeah.
Change out the C-suite, then you change out the levels below. And so the market's starting to pick up again, which is nice. Last year, I don't know if you guys felt the same. Last year, it was really dead.
Yeah.
Last summer was particularly quiet.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of PE firms were changing out.
It's a split between perm and temp. I mean, we saw a lot of interim support or
fractional.
Oh no!
What are your thoughts on? Because
I just don't
sometimes
know the word. To be honest, is the thing.
Because people sometimes think, okay, if I do fractional, I'll build up my profile to the next kind of thing. That's another stepping stone. Kind of 50-50, whatever works. But why not give it, if you're going to give a chance on somebody for 3 days a week, why not give a chance on them like 5 days a week?
Exactly.
Is that just me? I don't know.
Don't be wrong. There are some businesses at the stage
they
where
just don't need it.
Correct. And they want actually something bigger because of whatever the particular challenge is.
Yeah.
But I think that took away a lot, I think. Not everything, but
do you get a lot of fractional, or do you see
we do now? I mean, actually, a lot of our customers that we've worked with over the years have themselves taken the decision, either through relationships they've got with VCs, and they they want them on the bench to be able to support across 2 or 3 different businesses. But it takes time to build it up.
If you're part of a P, like if you're part of a fund,
yes, a lot easier.
You're almost like a non-operating partner.
Exactly,
operating partner.
Yeah, but again, getting to that point is hard. And I think the non-exec bit I think is interesting because people perceive that even when you're recruiting one, people perceive it to be quite a closed network as well. So you've almost got this
I can see that
weird sort of.
But I don't know. I remember meeting the first chairman when I got back here, and I was literally like 2 weeks landed. We didn't have our stuff. There's no furniture in the house, and I'm trying to find a suit to go and chat to this guy. And I just remember feeling nervous, like I'm this elusive chairman, and he's just like random grandfather, just like a normal guy, and you're sitting there going, oh. This is it. What?
Yeah, the curtain has been pulled back.
Why was they're just people at the end of the day. And what's been interesting as well, coming more PE back, is I've been networked to a lot of family offices with very high net worth principals, and you think, okay, you've built a very prominent business or career, and some are very aloof. Okay, fine. Trust there's a lot of concern around trust, given obviously probably life experience that they've had leading up to that point. And then some are really, you know what, I just want to do good work. I just want to, and they're really chill. And you just think, well, you're a little bit different from me because I don't have a B on my bank account and several Bs at that. But I mean, and they're just, I could just want to just do good work. And you just think you put them on a different precipice or like pedestal to kind of say, okay, you must be different than me. And actually, you put your trousers on the same way in the morning. Yeah. So I've just kind of learned like everybody's the same in the book of life. If you're decent, kind, collaborative to people, it'll come back. But with boundaries, I have to say. But it's been interesting, that whole network of how you kind of look at people.
Yeah, I bet.
So if you're going for your first NED role, and you're really kind of intimidated, and I'm going to meet this chairman, you're probably not going to put your best self forward, whereas it's just another person to meet. And if it works out, great. And if it doesn't, there's another person down the line to meet as well.
And often professionally, they've trodden a very similar path, just a bit further on.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless you're in the ultra net worth.
Well, we are starting to run out of time, actually. That's gone very, very quickly. We've got a couple of closers.
Very quick.
Just to finish the session.
You've done a huge amount, and you're heavily involved in lots of different businesses, and life sciences particularly is an area that academically you're invested in, and professionally you are as well. But I guess if there was any advice you could give yourself 10 years ago, 15 years ago, now, what would that be?
I was really impatient.
Okay.
So I just wanted to get to the next thing and learn the next thing, and when I talked about transitioning out of the lab and being able to explain the science, I just wanted to jump into certain roles where I'm very grateful I had the path that I had. So the patience on each thing being a learning experience. And probably the other bit was that I use now is probably about halfway through my career is one of the roles that I was offered. I thought the transformation role. I thought, ooh, like what is that going to do for me?
Yeah.
And the sponsor had said to me, "What do you need to say yes?" Which nobody ever asks, right? They just kind of, "Oh, go do it because it makes my life easier," right? And I said, "You know what? If you want a project manager, it's not me. If you want if you give me a white piece of paper and you want me to design the future of this organization, like I'm on board." And he said, "Right, go talk to the other people and ask for the white piece of paper." And I did. And they just looked at me like, "Okay, fine." And I just thought, why didn't I ask for that?
Sure.
I just never, I just kept thinking, oh, if I say no, is it going to harm my career? If I don't,
I think a lot of people,
if I don't do this,
Yeah.
is it going to, derail me? And then, so just kind of think through things on a different facet. So you have your knee-jerk reaction, and then think through things of like, what would it take to say yes to this? And what would it bring in a grand path of career? So I think we're all just, a sum of our experiences. What would this kind of bring? So I didn't want to do too many of the same type of roles because I wanted to build out. But it's also the market has shifted to really value that where it probably didn't a decade ago. So probably say patience and then, just a little bit of what I just talked about.
And if someone's earlier on in their career and they've got looking at a few options as a life science, I guess, advocate.
Yeah, a STEM advocate.
Yeah, STEM advocate. Yeah, what is it about the industry that sort of kept you in it? And I guess would you say, would be a good career move for people that are considering it?
So it depends on which side of the fence you're on. When I was in the lab, I was talking to one of the heads of finance who'd done same path as me, but she was 20 years further down the line. And I'll never forget this conversation. She said, "Stefanie, you got to be sure this is what you want to do." And she goes, "So in the lab, you solve really complex, super interesting problems, and they're all different all the time, right? There's so much about biologics and science we don't know. There's so much technology builds where you can revisit stuff in the past. So it's different, complex, all that, but with different people. So you're constantly evolving in how you solve something." She goes, pretty much commercial and finance is I'm solving the same problem all the time, just maybe with slightly different people. So she's like, think about it. And it's like looking back on the career path, it's true, but there's a curiosity to kind of how can you do it better, differently? What can you bring that's your own? Hey, I've thought through this and I know you do it this way, but actually I think so. The curiosity probably element, I'd say, to answer your question, and how you can bridge between something so complex and make it really simple for people to engage and buy into and want to be a part of, because we're all combined by our health, right? So if I talk to you, I mean, tech is cool, don't get me wrong, but if I say to you, there's this super interesting wellness tech coming out that will give you brain consolidation of 4 hours and 20 minutes, so refresh you from 4 hours of sleep in 20 minutes, would you do it?
100%.
Okay, so that's the pitch, right? But if I went all the scientific jargon of what you have to do, you'd be like, "Sorry, what are we doing? Like, what are you trying to?"
Yes.
So it's how do you kind of pull that together? So I'd also say people talk, I guess maybe the buzzwords 15, 20 years ago is, oh, work on your branding, work on your storytelling, work on all this stuff, right? I think storytelling is probably the most important element. So how can you take all this information from 1,000 swim lanes, and you can do that in any part of finance, in any sector, and not just life science, but the explanation of why is it important, why should you care about it, that changes at every level of the organization. So you're talking to your colleague, a lot of detail. You're talking to your boss, probably 20% less detail. You're talking to the CEO, 10% detail. Do you care about this? Kind of. And here's why. But I've got it, and this is the plan, so I just need you to be aware. Or you really care about this because this is big. But, here's what we need to align on. And so that's very different than the team where I'm like, okay, you're in the weeds, digging up, making sure we understand. So that build over a career, I think, is most important no matter where you sit, because finance knows everything, right? Everybody's salaries, everybody's details, everybody's business plan, everybody's metrics, everything. So how are you utilizing that to tell a better story that helps somebody that's 3 levels up make a better decision, which in turn drives shareholder value? So the whole food chain.
Together, yeah. I'd say every investor network or workshop that we get involved in, it always comes back to the storytelling. And actually, how do we build up to that point where...
Do you guys see that from your recruitment perspective, that there's a wide range of it, or at a certain level are people in a similar kind of, ability, let's say?
No, I think that the observation, and again, conscious of time, but one of the observations we get a lot of the time from investors is about this sort of erosion of ability of boards to be able to tell a good story, especially in life sciences, and in the UK true. Actually, and specific investors that we work with regularly cite that the UK has this particular problem more so than, and I don't think we're on our own, right? But I do think the UK particularly, and I just wonder, you see a lot. I wonder if you see that yourself, and we come across it all the time.
I think at GSK they did board papers.
Okay.
So there were no decks. Well, at least from our commercial side. There were no, so you had to actually write the story, which, okay, some of the papers were about 25 pages. I get it. There were some tables. It bought me a few pages, but it was lovely that you could actually explain. So when we wrote the business plan, you could explain. When I wrote about viability, you could explain. So people could read the story, digest, and actually then come to the board and say, right, I agree, or I don't. Whereas I found that at Gilead, it was all slide packs. It was nothing. And so you're looking at a slide with a table going, should I care about that? Or
what's this represent?
What was versus last year? Or what are you going to do with it? You're going to, you're looking at cash flows. Do you want to buy back shares, or you just want me to see it? So then it leaves so much open to interpretation. You get in the room and there's questions where you just think, that's where you went with it on that slide? Like, okay. So there's a very difference of it. So I like to kind of at least bridge both. Sometimes you just need a good table and chart to have a visual, but I tend to lean back to kind of consulting days where you have a clean white slide, a good graphic, and it tells you enough, but you can start to have a conversation. Or I write memos, right? So a 2-page to say, this is what we're going to talk through.
Love a 2-page memo.
I mean, no more, right?
Love a 2-page memo.
You can't, once you get to the 3rd page, if it's front and back, okay. Like once you get to the 3rd, you're like, all right, I'm starting to check out. What's the point? But so there's different approaches. I know Bezos talks all the time where he sits in the boardroom and he makes them read in front of him as if it's school.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Listen, to each their own, but I mean, it's the interesting part about the different boards is some boards that come prepared to have the conversation, and some ask you the same question every single time you meet. So got to take the rough with the smooth, I have to say.
That's interesting.
But it's a good experience, right?
Yeah, 100%. And it's so different in every single, you say you're solving the same problems, but genuinely just
there's a little tweak to it.
So
it's not, it's med tech now, or it's not biologic, or it's a Europe problem. It's not a US problem, or, it's a, hey, we've got this interesting technology sublicense. What should we do with it? It's like, well, I guess I'll build a subco and let's give it a go. Let's see what's happened. So stuff, it's a little bit, kind of what pops in and what pops up. But it's interesting also to see how you explain to boards as well. So I've had to say a few times, we've all agreed this is distracting to do kind of a strategic deep dive on, but you keep asking me about it. So am I missing something? And then, no, I see what you mean. And then I got the same thing again where I say then the same response again. And I go, okay, well, this is where I'm coming from. And I said, so it's a curiosity from your part. Let's just have a side conversation and stop distracting
from
the main.
rest of the agenda.
I'm happy to educate, right, or
Yeah,
to
sure.
my best of my ability, but it's not a board level needed discussion.
And once I've told you, I want you to read it back to me in front of everyone else, as Jeff said.
Like having, doing a kind of, not play, but doing like a
sure.
monologue where you're just like, please retain.
Start again.
Yeah, that's very true.
Good.
Oh,
well, look, we've run out of time. I mean, we could do another hour, to be honest. But thank you ever so much.
Thank you for having me.
Bit of free advertising for yourself. So the networking partnership you're nedding is called.
So it's CFO Mastermind.
CFO Mastermind
is the big one.
Yeah.
Which I got to chair last November, which was fantastic. Just phone a friend. Can you do the keynote with me and like try to build a panel? But I will say, at least for the finance community, when I chaired that event, every single person was, I want to do something different and I want to expand and I want to move, but I'm too afraid to say anything because I don't want to be viewed in a particular light. So Carolina's the lady that founded it and her husband, and they're wonderful. And so I set up the day to kind of explore that in a way where people could have those conversations without feeling outed or exposed. So it's a really good community to network and a really good community to solve problems and also have this like, how's your sector? What's your sector like? And then they're like, don't come to mine. And then the other one's like, come to mine. So that's really cool. And then try to volunteer for a couple, like just, kids that are like sixth form or, just trying to get people engaged in science. And I have to say, there's not a lot of women.
No, life science is a big problem. We lose so
come
much.
on.
I know.
There's some really great ones, but it's still. So last summer, I must have met, 15 CEOs. And I mean this in the nicest, politest way. I will caveat till the cows come home. All middle-aged white men, not one female. And every chairperson was the same profile. And you just think, oh,
it's not
come
good
on.
enough. It's just not good enough. It's.
So the wellness med tech that I'm advisor of, it's a female founder.
Yeah,
and
great.
she is
Very
epic.
cool.
I'm like, all right, let's go.
Yeah.
So
Amazing.
thank you very much for having
No,
me.
thank you. Really appreciate your time. So, to anyone that's been listening, this has been Topline Talks. You can see us on our website, on YouTube, and we've got the audio on Spotify, I think, as well. So,
and Apple.
Oh, wow. Look at you
Apple
guys.
as
Well done.
Yeah, very
Hitting all the platforms.
Yeah. Stephanie, thanks for your time.
Thank you for having me.
And see you on the next one.